RPG at the enemy position.
I tam тоже снимай. Отсюда. Отсюда. Подними. И там как горит. Как горит. Алекс, видел?
Да.
What's up, everybody? Back at you with another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV. We got a real special guest today, a guy that grew up in Rhode Island. He ends up in the Army. Something tragic happens in the Middle East that he'll get into. He comes home, drug addiction, things just spiral out of control. And as crazy as this sounds, he ends up in Ukraine, and he's over there fighting against Russia, obviously, and training some people. But we'll get into his story. Tell the people who you are, brother. Let's talk about you.
Hi, Chaz. Hi, everyone. My name's Alex Tobiason. Just want to thank you for, letting me come on here and get my message out to the people.
So, let's just kind of talk about what your life was like. I know you grew up in Rhode Island. You end up in the service. Tell me what your life was like growing up.
Growing up as a child, I guess I'd say that I had a pretty good childhood, pretty good basic upbringing. My parents were drug addicted, anything like that. Pretty much had everything I needed in terms of survival and whatnot. But over time, I always been a bit of a stubborn person. Always wanted to take my own route. Always wanted to kind of push the envelope, no matter what it was, whether it's in school. I was always getting into trouble somehow, always trying to push the envelope with the teachers, trying to see what I could get away with, things like that. But I always kind of had in my mind like a vision that I wanted to serve in the U.S. military. So that goal being in my mind the whole time was just like, why am I even going to school? Why am I learning some of this stuff? Because in my mind, as soon as, I graduate, I knew exactly where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. But, considering as a young guy, pretty much good parents, good upbringing, played a lot of sports, so I couldn't really complain about my parents not doing what they needed to do for me.
And then eventually, you end up in that military, you end up overseas. Let's talk a little bit about that. What's it like for you?
Well, when I first enlisted in the U.S. Army, it was like a dream come true, to a degree. With that being said, it was like I had about a year and a half left of high school when I decided that, I would drop out of school in order to get my GED quickly, join the military with my parents' consent at the age of 17, because you could do that. So as soon as I ended up getting out, got my GED, my parents, they signed away. It was like the very first step in life of something that I wanted to do was actually flourishing. And at that point, it just kind of raised my confidence. But as soon as I got to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is where the infantry school called 11 Bravo OSET, the 1 unit stop training, as soon as I got down there, it was a bit of a shock. Like, the reality of what basic training is, because everybody watches, Full Metal Jacket. Everyone has the idea of the drill sergeant, gunny yelling at you, which at infantry school, trust me, you get that, and you get much more of that than if you were to join the military and, join some other branch or some other job occupation that's not infantry per se. So they give it to you a bit harder. And being 17 years old, it was like really the first time I was away from home. But I kind of like, I had that mental, that goal that I painted in my head. I was like, this is what I want to do. It's what I've been telling all my friends, neighbors, and families I wanted to do my entire life. So I'm not going to be that guy, who gets shipped off to basic training and then calls it quits after a few weeks just because, got scared or something. So
you're over there. I mean, you obviously see some combat, right? When you get to the Middle East.
Yeah, so after graduating from basic, went to airborne school, which another thing was I always wanted that on my military resume. Wanted to be airborne, soldier. Go there, do that, come home. And it was very quickly that my unit got mobilized. We started doing mobilization training to go to Afghanistan. And our primary job was going to be PRT security force, which means each province in Afghanistan has a provisional reconstruction team. And essentially, it was just like a company made out of engineers, civil affairs, people from Department of Defense, defense intelligence agencies, different things like that, different reasons and naturing. Their job was to reconstruct and build each province that they were given. So our job was the security force aspect, which was designed to take them from the forward operations base to wherever the key leader engagement meeting would take place at. Essentially cordon off the area and then, do an exfil, bring them back straight to the forward operations base, and we would be done with it for the day. Besides that, we had other duties like quick reaction force, such as being on standby for any type of, major emergency type incidents, whether, one company goes out on a mission, gets ambushed, they call it QRF, to come out and kind of, bolster, reinforce them at whatever's gone on.
So you're over there. I mean, let me ask you this. This is stuff that people want to know. You ever have to put someone's lights out over there?
No. So when you're training for this type of stuff, I will say that they pretty much put it in your head, especially being an infantryman, that's like what you want. That's what you want to do. You're there for the fight. You're training consistently for that contact, that action. And when I was out there on these missions, I would be on the turret gun. So I'd be on the M240 Bravo. It's a light machine gun, 7.62 weapon. I'd be sitting there and I'd just be like, come on, make my day. Like I'm wishing that somebody would just pop out of an alleyway with an RPG, just, pop out of a balcony with an AK-47, because all I wanted to do was just put those rounds down range. And the first incident I got into, in which there was actual live contact, besides, one incident being roadside bombs, indirect fire from artillery, that type of chaotic atmosphere where you're given out what we call the 3Ds, which is the direction, the distance, and description. It's the first three things you give out during enemy contact. It's like the fog of war enacts. You're just putting rounds down range in areas where you suspect, where the fighter came out at, or where someone drew some fire from. But you're not actually like engaging a human being where I could say to myself, like, I put that glass right on that dude, pulled the trigger 100%. I got that kill. That hadn't happened to me.
I'm sure you've done some of that in Ukraine. We'll talk about that in a minute, though. So something ends up happening tragically, right? While you're over there, one of your friends ends up dead. Let's talk a little bit about that. Tell the people how that happens. And I think that also leads to, maybe some depression, emotional things. You come home and, you end up caught up in the cycle of addiction, we'll say. But let's get into that stuff. What happened to your friend?
Yeah, so again, a lot of times civilians will ask this question, be like, have you ever killed someone? Personally, like, I don't mind that question because, like you said, it's like, that's what some people want to know. They want to get straight to it. But over time, I've kind of looked down on that question. I think to myself, what if somebody unknowingly asks somebody like Specialist, I won't say his last name, but the guy who was in my vehicle, who the only person he killed on that deployment was a member of our platoon, how that question would affect him personally. So on March 22nd, 2012, we were out doing some kind of operations where we like sight all of our weapons and test things out, basically big shooting range with convoy. And in the end, a lot of the Afghan children, they would run around between our vehicles to collect shell casings. A lot of these shell casings, they bring back to like bizarre markets. They melt them down, use them for stuff, sell them. Not really sure what they do exactly, but that's basically what happens. And we had an incident where a couple of these Afghan children were actually climbing underneath our MRAP Max Pro vehicles. If you don't know what an MRAP military vehicle is, it's a mine-resistant, ambush-proof vehicle. It's essentially like a giant armored personnel carrier. And there's so many blind spots on dealing with one of those things. You really have to rely on coordination from, guys outside on the ground, turret gunner like me, to kind of give directions. And while this was happening, I was given the orders to go back inside the vehicle, so to get down from the turret and start strapping down like ammo boxes that were, taken out of place and laying around, start strapping down equipment and stuff like that. The driver, he started backing up, and I just immediately started hearing screaming, like just the most terrible blood-curdling screams you can imagine. So it was at that moment I got back in the turret to kind of like look around, do a 360-degree check of the area, and I couldn't see anything, and he kept like backing up and then stopping, and I remember the platoon sergeant just yelling, he's just like, hey, mother effer, stop the vehicle. And I started yelling down the driver. I'm like, dude, stop. You effing ran someone over, And he was like, oh my God, are you serious? I was like, dude, I'm serious. Like someone got run over. And he started just like punching the steering wheel, like crying and shit. And I was like, dude, like, get yourself together. Like, let's see what's going on. So I'm kind of watching down to the left, trying to figure out, who we just ran over. If it's, I don't think it's a child, and I even said to him, I'm like, I think you ran over an effing child, dude. And before I know it, there's a thing called a 9-line medevac. And it's basically when you call in a medical evacuation, there's a 9-line stage to how to like coordinate this. And at one of the stages is like what the status of the casualty is. And one of them is military personnel. Another one is civilian personnel. So I remember when they hit that part, he said military personnel. And on the radio, I'm thinking like, oh, like who the F do we just run over then? If it's not a civilian, like you just ran over one member of our platoon, are you serious? And, that's when I saw all the medics, people doing their thing. I wanted to get down and help, but as a lot of the guys, viewers, some who might be military understand that, like, if you're in a turret gun, you don't lead that turret, like there's medics to do that. I'm doing this. That's my job. So I noticed, we pop smoke, the bird comes in, they holst the litter up, and I could see, and I saw it was Sergeant Weichel. And I saw him like shivering, convulsing, his face was blue. There was just a horrible like blood trail that had to do with his intestines had come out. It was a very graphic sight. And I remember them putting him on the bird. And then I just said, I was praying in my head. I remember I said, that guy, there's no way he's going to make it. There's no way.
Guy that was he a guy that you associated with daily? Someone that you liked? One of your buddies? One of your partners?
Yeah. So during mobilization training, our platoon became like really tight, and our platoon was made up of 4 squads. So it wasn't many of us, so it's pretty much small group. We weren't in the same squad, and we weren't really like best of friends or like friends, but I knew him. Like, he was a bit of like, the platoon clown, like a joker type guy, funny. Everyone knew him, and I remember we just drove back to the operations base, and we're doing some stuff, clearing out the trucks. And I remember the chaplain came with our company sergeant major and some people, and they were like, hey, look, Weichel, he didn't make it. He went to Jalalabad Jaff airfield there, and he's deceased. So as soon as he said that, I was like, I'm shot, because I was like, I couldn't believe that like one of us would get killed like that, especially someone And then that dawned on me where it's like, I had a heart to heart with one of the sergeants. Remember, I was 18 years old at the time, private. He's like, dude, like, this is effing war. Like, we came here to do that to people. Like, people are going to die. Like, that's the whole nature of this. And like, now you're having second thoughts. Like, now you're growing a conscious, but it just goes to show you, it's like the human side of things. People say all the time, it's like, that freeze, fight, flight type behavior. Sometimes you just kind of freeze up. It's overwhelming, choke. Maybe, I was a bit of more emotional when I was younger than I am now. But that was definitely like the introductory to what war is, in a sense.
Not only war, but extreme violence. You're 18 years old. You see, something that's just, outrageous, what you described. Does it mess with you mentally and emotionally, or does it pass, or is it?
It did. I would say, like, since that day on until maybe I was like 24 years old, it was something that was bothering me pretty much when I first came home. It was bothering me daily. And then, especially because, like, I had some members of the platoon saying, like, oh, you were the turret gunner. You should have had eyes, back there. Or, so there was a little bit of this, like, maybe some people had some resentment towards me or the driver, this and that, so there's some alienation from the platoon and the family of brotherhood itself. But, after some time, those wounds, they start to heal. I went through some PTSD, inpatient and outpatient type therapy while I was getting discharged from the U.S. Army. It just kind of helped me deal with that and manage those emotions.
You end up leaving you end up leaving the Middle East, not the U.S. Army, and you go back home, right? You go back to Rhode Island?
Yeah, go back home. Well, actually, first I ended up staying in Washington, D.C. for a while because I got discharged out of Fort Belvoir, which is down in Northern Virginia in Fairfax County. And, probably a lot of people know that it's pretty easy to get your hands on illicit substances in Washington, D.C. That's kind of one of the reasons why I ended up staying in D.C. Was because, I was close to kind of that open drug market type atmosphere. I knew I could get everything I wanted, down there. So I kind of lived there for like a year and a half.
When does the addiction start? When you come home from the military, or was it before?
It was right when I was done with the military. I ended up I left the U.S. Army so I could back up a little bit. About a year before my discharge, after I came home from Afghanistan, I got shot in the leg during an armed robbery. And
we're gonna hold on.
Yeah,
we're gonna
get there. But basically, that in and of itself spun me into like an opioid addiction, which I never had experience with before until that happened.
Stop you for a second. You end up in a robbery. Was this at the house party, or was this something different?
Yeah. So I was what we call a leave, which is like you submit a form for your vacation days when you're in the U.S. Army. I submitted my leave form. I went back home to Rhode Island, where I'm from. Go to a house party, hanging out with friends, which are no good. Some guys that I ran the streets with earlier before I joined the U.S. Army. We're getting high, doing the wrong thing, drinking a lot. And, I ended up by telling one of the guys, I'm like, look, I got to go back to Virginia, tomorrow morning. So he's like, oh man, you really have to go, can you just try to call someone and stay longer? I'm like, no, dude, like, discipline, like, it's different. A lot of these people on the street don't understand that. That was one thing that was difficult being in the military, is going back with these civilian friends who just don't have perception of like responsibility and stuff. I'm like, no, dude, like, gotta go home. End up going to an ATM and pull out a bunch of money that I was going to use to drive back down there to have. And doing so, this girl that I was with, she saw me do that. She saw how much money I had. She went and told her cousin that, I had $1,000 on me. I just pulled out $1,000 out of the bank. And they started plotting, behind my back. And the guy said to me, he was like, hey, you think you could drive me to our apartment, our apartment block before you go out? Because, of course, bridge, you'd be on your way out. And I was like, yeah, why not? So I'm driving him over there. And they're like, hey, why don't you just come up for a minute, you know? Just I'm like, nah, I really gotta go. And the guy's like, oh, well, you know, we sell you some weed and stuff. Like, we got some weed upstairs, whatnot. And I was like, all right, quickly, you know? So I just say, turn the engine off of my car, got out with these guys, walk in the apartment building, just started walking up the staircase. And before I knew it, this guy was standing there on top with a white t-shirt, you know, wrapped around his face. He was brandishing a double action revolver, whether it was like a 38 or 32, I'm not exactly sure. And I remember the dude was just like, yo, this is a robbery, you know, give us all your money. And at first, just like took me back, like I couldn't believe it. Like, really? You know, like robberies happen like where I'm from, but not usually like with a weapon, like confronting you like that. Usually it's some stuff like somebody do some bitch shit, like, you know, take your money or take your weed or whatever, you know? So when somebody just pulled out a gun on me, I was like, no, dude, I'm not giving you my money, you know? And the dudes, we all just kind of looked at each other and the guy just shot me right there, you know?
Chance, he just shoots you. So when he shoots you, what happens? Do you drop the money? Do you try to get out of the house, out of the stairwell? What happens?
Yeah, my first instinct was just to like take off, you know, kind of like a deer, I guess. You know, like you shoot a deer or something, and just like jumps and runs away. That's like what I did. Just immediately, just boom, just made a beeline outside the apartment complex. And on my way, I ended up just falling right on my face because my leg just stopped working. Like he shot me in the leg, and it just literally just like didn't exist. Like I collapsed on the ground. Dude runs up to me, puts the gun in my face, tells me, hey, I'm not going to ask you again. Give it up. So I just pulled out the money, pulled out my phone, keys, everything. I was like, here you go. Take it all. Just don't shoot me, you know? Guys take it. They start running away. Neighbor heard a gunshot, comes out, sees me there laying on the ground. They gave me a bunch of towels from their kitchen to help me stop the bleeding. Because the bullet hit my femur, so it did a lot of damage when it comes to blood loss. It's kind of up closer to my hip. I'm just so lucky that it didn't hit me in the femoral artery. Just so lucky that day. But yeah, you know, after that, ended up going through surgery. And anyone who knows when you have a serious, you know, break to your femur like that, like it takes a long time of recovery and physical therapy.
So now you slip in, after this, you kind of slip into addiction, opiates and things like that, right?
Yeah, to tell you the truth, like before this, the strongest drug that I touched and that I was using like was free-base cocaine. But once I got shot and was started on Oxycontin and Percocets or anything like that, it was just like I'd completely changed to one for the other, you know?
So you're free-basing cocaine. Wow. Let me ask you this. Is there ever a point during this addiction where you're like, man, I was in the military, you know, I was, you know, responsible at one time. Like, what are you doing with your life? Is there ever that point where you're like, wow, this has got to stop?
At that time, not really. You know, and I think it's really because of my age that played a part. Because, you know, at this point, I was like 21 years old, you know? And you're still kind of in that young mindset. I had more of a young mindset where I'm like, you know, I'm more of a badass because I was an infantryman. I went through airborne school and I was in Afghanistan. You know, I'm more like a real guy than these dudes. You know what I mean? It kind of gave me more of like an arrogant type edge, you know. But just like when that dude shot me in the leg, it like brought me right back down to reality. It's like, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a Navy SEAL or anyone, you know, you can still get touched by anybody. You know what I mean?
But once you leave the military and all this stuff's going on, what are you doing for work? I mean, are you in the private sector? What are you doing?
I mean, yeah, so there was one point in Ukraine where I started teaching English. I started getting into being an English teacher.
Oh, no, I'm going to stop you. Now, I'm talking about when you're in D.C. and you're back in Rhode Island. Are you actually working a job?
No, I was living in D.C. because I just got out of the Army. I was just living on benefits at that point. Just trying to, the rent was astronomical down there for the area that I was living in. and I wasn't getting happy. I know that I needed to get a job. I needed to do something different. That's actually why I ended up driving back to Rhode Island, getting back to be with my parents or going at home.
And you're in Rhode Island. Now you end up in jail. Tell the people why you end up in jail in Rhode Island.
So I come home back to Rhode Island, and I got a job then working as a bar back. And, just living that party lifestyle. I had developed this opiate addiction at that point and started reconnecting with old friends. And at that point, I realized, I had old friends who were into this opiate drug addiction as well. So it's like, what do? Start hanging out with people like that. And one night, I was really drunk, just didn't have that much money. I said to myself, I was like, look, I'm gonna go rob a convenience store. Like, I'm gonna go rob a gas station or anything, go get this money. And I remember saying to myself, though, like, if it comes down to it, like, I'm not gonna hurt somebody. I'm not gonna do like what some guy did to me. You know what I mean? I was like, more of the thought process of like, I'll go into a gas station, I'll ask for the money, the person, give it to me, and that's it, And I didn't even have a firearm at this time either. So like I had to improvise, find small knife that I had. It was a pen knife. End up walking into this Cumberland Farms and just walked up behind the counter. And I said to the lady, I said, hey, look, this is a robbery and I need the money that's in the register. And I remember she looked at me like I was, crazy. She's like, you can't be serious. And I said, yeah, like, I'm serious. And she said, okay, then. She opened up the register, handed me the money, and I turn around and I leave. And as soon as I leave, I go to the getaway car, and that dude just drives away. And then the getaway driver just drives away on me. So I'm like running down the road, and the area that I was in, there wasn't like, it was just beaches and farmland. I'm just thinking like, damn, I might end up getting picked up by the police. So I gotta, get rid of everything. So I just started getting rid of all my stuff, like all the money that I just taken, the knife that I just had, all this type of stuff. And I'll get rid of all of it. And, police, they stopped me and they knew who I was at this point and everything. And, they end up bringing me in, and they end up, bringing me in, detectives come in and talk to me, everything like that. And they sent me to the intake center, And at that time, I didn't realize the gravity of the punishment that could come with robbery. I had no idea people could do like 10 years in prison or even more just for what I just did. I was thinking, the worst case scenario is like, you might get like a year, 2 years or something. I had no idea it was that serious.
So you end up in the county jail or whatever down there. What's life like? I mean, you've been in the military, you've seen war, you've seen extreme violence. What's life like for you to go into a jail? I mean, people single you out, anybody, start any shit? Because, eventually something happens with you there.
Yeah, so first it was like a huge, like, culture shock for me. When you walk in and they tell you, take off your clothes, get naked in front of a bunch of front of guys, like lift your nutsack up, spread your cheeks, everything like that. It was just like, whoa, people, they bring you to your cell and it's just like, good night, lock the door. And you're like, wait a second, I can't just open this up. And you know what I mean? They're like actually stuck in something, you're confined. And it started to dawn on me. I was like, wow, this is real. This is some serious shit. You can't be a man in here. You have to wait for them to then pop the doors just to go out to eat or take a shower. And then you got to go back inside and they close it up on you. It was like just adjusting to that was really difficult for me. But, in myself, I said to myself, I was like, look, I've been through hard times. Like, I know there's light at the end of the tunnel. This isn't something that, I'm going to be in here for the rest of my life. So just like when I was in the military, just play the game, just keep my head down, Don't rock the boat. I understand kind of how people work. Like, don't talk bad about people, like things like that. Don't let, what you could call like different gossiping, like things like that. I'm like, listen, just stay to myself, trying to find somebody who's halfway solid and intelligent, kind of just stick with them, because one thing was, you got a lot of guys in there. I know that I myself committed a stupid crime. I'm an idiot just for being in there. But like at the end of the day, there were some people in there who are just like really, really, really stupid and ignorant. And you're just like, God, like, how could I ever hang out with this person? Or, how could I get along with this guy or something like that? But you just, after a while, it's like, just ended up using my training and my focus just to help me, pass by without creating too much of waves.
There been a physical confrontation in there?
So yeah, there was one time where I was working, so I ended up getting a job in the kitchen, and the way I got this was I wrote the lieutenant, like a job, they have a little job application thing, have a celly like look at it, make sure I'm not snitching on anyone, pass it in. They call me out, go in to interview. The lieutenant was like, hey, look, you said you were in the military. We take that very seriously here because like there's guys who lie about that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, and I know you're not lying about it. Like I looked you up. Like, so you want a job in the kitchen? Okay, that's fine. We'll move you out and work in the kitchen. So okay. So I ended up working in the kitchen for a couple of weeks. And while I'm down there, one of the guys who's working there as well, I was basically doing dishwashing, and while I was doing it, he didn't like the way that I was like slamming the trays down into the these little compartment things. And he was like, stop fucking slamming the trays. And I was like, I'm not slamming the trays. It's just the noise it makes when you place it in here, And he was like, I don't like that. It's too loud. I was like, all right. I was like, well, look, when I do this batch, I was like, tell me if this is loud enough for you. You know what I mean? So I'm doing it. And I purposely at one point, and he straight up, he was like, hey, like you're acting like a bitch, said something like that. And I was like, all right, cool. Just kept doing it. And I told some of the guys that I was working with, I was like, hey, look, this guy basically called me a bitch. I was like, what do you think I should do about it? They're like, no, you shouldn't do anything about it. Like, look, you're going to get out of here soon. You got a good job in the kitchen. Like, who cares what that guy said, And I was like, nah, like, they can't go down like that. So as soon as we went up for rec, I ended up just catching the dude walking into his cell and just started beating on him, And I just started beating on this guy. And before I know it, as you guys say, it hit the deuces. Guys come in. And I was actually surprised by, like, when the COs come in, they spray people in our jail, as long as you lay down on the ground, you don't, like, fight or anything like that, usually, like, you're pretty good. But this CO, I don't know why, he just started, like, beating my ass. Like, he just, like, picked me up like a rag doll, started hitting me and stuff, too. And I was, like, actually taken by surprise by that. And I remember bringing me into SEG, and the lieutenant was like, what happened? And I just told him straight up, I was like, this guy called me a bitch. So when we went in here, I just started beating on him. He was like, that was the most honest statement I've ever heard in my life. Like, nobody ever says that. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're going in the hole for 30 days. Okay. So I'm in the hole, and then they call my name for court. And I'm like, court? Like, why do I have court? And they're like, you need to go to this county. It's a different county than the one my case was in. And that's when I realized that they were actually charging me with assault, like a state crime, for doing it in the jail, which I didn't even understand that they could, give you street charges while you're in jail just for like a fight. But I learned that pretty quickly.
I want to take you to, you end up getting out of jail and you decide, you know what, my life's fucked up. I'm drug addicted. I got these, these pending charges. I finally made it out, but these charges are still pending. You get bail or bond or whatever. And you decide one day, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Ukraine. I know your grandparents are Ukrainian, but you grew up here. Your parents grew up here. And you decide, I'm going to Ukraine. What is your thought process with everything going on in Ukraine? You just pick Ukraine, or why? Why do you pick Ukraine?
So this was back in like 2016. If you remember, in 2014, there's the annexation of Crimea, and this caused the war in Donbass. And I decided, I was like, look, I screwed up my life here in the United States. All I wanted to be was military. I can't even go back in the military because of what I just did, having felony charges and stuff. I said to myself, look, I want to maybe try giving another, shot at being